This is Andy Purewal for Boxing Social in association with Betfred, and I'm joined by Jon Pegg over Zoom once again. John, how are you? How is life and how's things going in the gym?
Yeah, not too bad. Gym's really busy. We're not allowed amateurs or like keep fitters in, but it seems like all the pros, and we didn't realise how many of them are all wanting to get in the gym because they've got nothing to do and they want to be first in line for fights. Well, it's we're having to do a couple of sessions to make sure that they're all apart and stuff, but it's really busy. Everyone's kind of in the gym from the last 18 months, like lads disappear for 6 months or they have a bit of time off. Everyone's raring to go. So even though there's not many fights, the gym is nice and busy.
There's one thing I wanted to try on, is just something that you mentioned at the start. You haven't had the amateurs back in. I spoke to Nigel Travis, who obviously works with amateurs himself, and he slammed the lack of support that the amateur scenes had throughout this pandemic. And he himself, he said the damage and the long-lasting damage that will be caused because of it is frightening to think about. From your perspective and from the guys you work with and the girls that you work with as amateurs, how damaging do you think the current circumstances will be for the growth and the future of boxing's next stars?
I honestly think that the amateur game is going to be kind of just in withdrawal for a couple of years. People who were just getting into things, they've dropped off. A lot of good amateurs have turned pro. Even though they can't get many fights, at least there's some light at the end of the tunnel with the pros. I've got about 4 or 5 now waiting for meetings with the board because they've decided to turn pro and they wouldn't have otherwise. And there's just like there's just nothing happening for them. Like the boxing board have done a really good job to keep people up to date with emails and to give them a bit of hope and to like get the TV shows on. And it hasn't been easy, but they've done it, and they've also kept everyone kind of up to date. And they suspended the payments on licenses. And it's not a great situation, but you've kind of felt like, well, we know what's happening and we know what's going on. With the amateurs, it's just like they've shut the curtains and says, see you whenever. And they're just, there's a lot of amateurs will be lost to the game because they're doing it for the love of it. So they're not going to hang around too long and they're finding other stuff to do, even though it's locked down. So, yeah, I think it's going to really kind of put amateur boxing back a few years and it's going to be hard to get the momentum going again for a good 12 months to 2 years, I think.
What do you think the amateur scene needs to give it that boost to kind of get everybody back up and running again? Is it simply just a financial kind of package put together, or do you think there's more to it now?
It needs people to just make it happen because the GB setup is still going. They've found a way around it. The Boxing Board of Control have given us a set of rules to follow so we can open the gym. Obviously, the government are saying at the moment only elite athletes can train, which is, which we kind of understand, but give us some help and some guidance so we can do like outdoor sessions or one-to-one sessions with amateurs. You got to remember as well, some of these amateurs, they're not just really good amateurs, they're also like kids who are, their only kind of safe place is the gym. And that's been took away from them. So who knows what's happening? We might get back in a year or 6 months and some of them might be locked up. Some of them might have totally lost interest with the amateurs or boxing in general, started having a drink because they're in their house on their own and stuff like that. It's kind of just been neglected because it's not a business. It's not like a huge sport, amateur boxing, even though it's got so much history and recognition. So I just think it needs like the professionals. It needs somebody to say, right, here's the plan going forward. Because if there's no light at the end of the tunnel, it's hard to get anything done. Even if they say it's in 9 months' time, you're going to do this, people start planning towards it. People start planning what they can do, giving themselves a little kind of stability. At the moment, there's nothing. I haven't heard a single thing, to be honest.
With the pros that you train, John, and obviously yourself, Soggy, you've all been involved in the sport for many years, amongst others in the gym. What are you guys saying to the amateurs currently, and what are the amateurs saying to you about how they feel about the sport because they can't actually partake in it in any way, shape, or form at the minute?
Well, the amateurs who are really, really keen and don't want to kind of give up any time are just turning pro. And some of them were even saying, oh, it's not quite the right time. And they're like, well, what else we got to do? It means we can go back in the gym if we turn pro. So one, it sounds crazy being more involved with the program, but I actively encourage boxers not to turn pro. And I could tell you some pretty big names that were told to have another year in the amateurs just because I thought it was the right idea. But some of them are turning pro. Some of them are drifting off. Some are doing the outside training. Obviously, they're not allowed in the gyms, but if we're doing like a running session, they'll come along and tag along, you know. And they might not strictly be allowed to do that. But if they're running, we haven't asked them to come. But it's really difficult for them. And some of them are finding it hard, but we're just staying in contact with them. But like I say, the ones who are really keen and like quite driven, they've just decided to turn pro at 18, which is ridiculous. Like, you know, they could have really had a good future in a few more years in the amateurs. And they're just going, oh, well, I'll go pro then because they can fight. They have got like structure. They have got lights at the end of the tunnel. They are getting allowed to do stuff. And we're actively saying, no, stay amateur, wait there. And they're saying, why? We're not being told a thing. The governments are not making any kind of like they're not making any rules or anything for the amateurs. It's just like elite athletes can, nobody else. So, you know, we could lose a generation of good boxers, to be honest.
John, just moving forwards, obviously touching on to the professional guys in your gym now. Let's go back to last year. We haven't had a chance to catch up yet. Shakan Peters and Sam Eggington both fighting. Start off with Shakan. Unfortunately, he lost his British title fight to Craig Richards. Just reflecting on the fight, John, what do you guys make of it all now?
Well, you know, it's top level boxing. Top level boxing. You make a mistake, and you can be 100 points in front. You make one mistake, top level boxing, that's it. Shaq made 2 mistakes. He was in front on the cards. When he was boxing well, he was boxing well. But he made 2 mistakes. And the only kind of silver lining is the mistakes he made were things that Paul Coonahan had identified and was a little bit worried about and had hoped that he'd got rid of in training. But in a long 12-round fight where you're getting tired, that's where them little mistakes can creep out. And they did. And he got caught. And the other guy won the fight. You know, it's Shaq was well prepared, he did everything right, but in a 12-round fight at top level, it's really hard to not make a mistake. And if you've got a guy who's switched on and ready to, and the thing was, chatting to their coach afterwards, he actually says they was waiting for this because they was waiting for like something they'd seen, which we'd all seen him, and the chance come, and he took it. And, you know, if it was the other way around, we'd be applauding our guy for taking his chance when it came and coming from behind. Shaq was in front on points. He wasn't behind. He wasn't outclassed. It wasn't like, oh, you've got here and you shouldn't be here. He was winning on points and he got caught. He got fairly beat, but he was in the fight. Now, if he can go away and learn that mistake and come back as a better fighter, which we encourage fighters to do, as you know, then it'll just be a bump in the road. If he doesn't learn off that, then you're never going to get to the top anyway, you know, if you can't learn off mistakes. So, yeah, he made a mistake that had been identified and it still managed to creep out. And his opponent's coach was experienced enough to be looking for that and took advantage when it come. So now it's up to Shaq to show similar pedigree to get rid of them little mistakes.
What was the plan heading into the fight, John? Because when I spoke to Shaq, he said, you know, he was looking to move more than what he probably did, but he's also looking to plant his feet probably more than what we've been used to seeing him. Was that something that you guys were working on? Was it just
what we didn't want? We didn't want Shaq near the ropes. One, that's where Craig does his best work, and with Shaq's height advantages, you don't want to be too close to the ropes. And for the most part, he didn't, and that's when he was picking up the points and looking good and doing his job. When he backed to the ropes or when he was being backed up too easily, that's when the mistakes came. And that's what we was trying to avoid. But if everybody was getting it perfect, they'd all fight for the world title in their first fight because that's what fights are, learning fights. Unfortunately, when you get to British title level, even learning fights are top level and very dangerous. And, you know, it is what it is. It's no good worrying because it weren't like it was a complete shock. We all knew when it came, what it was. Something we'd been working on. But even when you're working on something all the time, it still might creep out somewhere. So it's just a fact of keep working on it, keep improving, and learn the lessons from a loss.
Domestically, it's a stacked division at light heavyweight. Some brilliant fights to be made. But in Shaq's case now, looking to come back from that defeat, what is next for him?
Well, personally, just getting back in there as quick as possible, just to shake it off, and then getting back in the same level. Because he's 31, so he's not old, but he's not young. But he wasn't outclassed. He wasn't out of his depth. He simply made a mistake at a good level and it catches you. If he was like blasted out early, or if he hadn't won a round, we'd say, "Oh, we've got to rebuild." All we've got to do is iron out the mistakes we was in the process of ironing out anyway, and he's still there. His conditioning was good. It is. We've got to learn off. Well, Shaq's got to learn off that. We've got to learn off it, and we just got to get it right next time. It wasn't outclassed, so we're not going to go all the way back to the drawing board, because for out the 9 rounds, 7 of them, it worked fairly well and everything was going right. And he had a couple of them where we got to get rid of that. So there's no need to go back to the drawing board. So just a get back in there kind of fight, and then look for what's out there. Not jumping into anything crazy, but definitely at the same level where he was beforehand. Like, we wouldn't turn down a Craig Richards or a Chad Sugden or a Dex Spellman or any of those guys with one fight, because he was at that level and doing well. We might not try and jump as far forward as if we'd have won that fight, but we'll definitely be looking to operate around the same level before the summer.
Just a matter of a couple of weeks before Shaq fought, we saw Lyndon Arthur overcome Anthony Yarde. I just want to quickly get your thoughts on that, John, before we do move on to Sam Eggington. Just what was your thoughts on seeing Lyndon defeat Anthony?
I picked it online, and I picked it almost exactly how it happened. I actually, we done a thing, and I says, I think we done a thing in the gym with Seconds Out or someone, and I says, Lyndon Arthur's got a much better jab than people give him credit for. I says, and sometimes Anthony Yarde waits for when he's going to chin him and lets points get scored while he's waiting for the inevitable. I says, I think he won't get to Lyndon Arthur, and Lyndon Arthur will nick it on points with a really good jab. So I was like that, because I hadn't picked any for a good while, so I was quite relieved to get that one, to be honest. But I thought he'd done a good job, and I thought he was really professional, and I thought he's showing strings to his bow every time he boxes. He's not just a big puncher who gets people out of there. I was really impressed by him.
Moving on to Sam Eggington, as I say, John, he overcame Ashley Theophane in what was very relatively easy and comfortable circumstances.
Do you want to know something surprising?
Go on.
One of the judges had it even.
Between Sam and Ashley?
Yep.
That's news to me. I didn't know. I don't know what the scorecards were, but
not many people do, because it wasn't put out there. But how shocking is that? One of the judges had it even with the knockdown. If there weren't a knockdown, he'd have had Sam behind. Now, do you see why Sam's making statements like, "I've got to knock him out"? Yeah, it's quite shocking, isn't it?
It's a surprise, certainly. Look, because I scored Sam, I think, every round up until the point of the stoppage.
We thought the first round could have gone either way, because Sam, as he does, was just having a look. And, we thought maybe, because you can't be too sure. But apart from that, we thought we won every round, including the knockdown round. And he was just doing a nice, steady job, taking his time, learning. And then we found out afterwards by someone who had a little glance at the cards that one of the judges had it even. And you wonder why Sam's got the attitude where he thinks he's got to knock him out to win. Quite shocking, I thought. But carry on.
It has caught me by surprise, John. Listen, I think it's an interesting topic to touch on. You kind of, I don't think you could probably ask anybody in the sport how they scored that fight, and I think you'd be surprised to find anybody who did have it at a draw at the point of the stoppage. Like with scoring in general, though, it's coming for a lot of criticism, certainly over these past couple of years. What do you think needs to be done to kind of either adjust or amend these faults that we're seeing now?
Do you know what? I just think people need to be pulled in and asked to explain certain scorecards. I know it's objective, and I understand that. And like me and you have had different opinions on scores. So, it's understandable. But when you ask like 20 people, and 19 are saying, well, that's fairly obvious, and one person's got it the other way around, that one person needs to explain herself, you know, in them kind of circumstances. If you ask 20 people and 10 have got it one way, 10 have got it the other, the judges have got the, you know, obviously they can go either way. But when everybody you ask is scoring it quite clearly one way and somebody's got it the other way, they need to explain that. And there needs to be an adjudication thing, perhaps retired judges or, you know, like guys who are, who are in the 70s now, but they've got 50 years experience. Perhaps there needs to be 3 of them who you know, who are beyond reproach because of their experience, who say, you've got to explain this. Because, so, you know, how would you explain having that fight even with a knockdown and stuff? I find it but then beforehand you got Sam saying it on many interviews, I can't leave it in the hands of the judges, and he shouldn't be having to do that. Do you know what I mean?
It's like I say, Johnny, it's a surprise to me. Like, that's the first time I've heard it, and it is a surprise to me.
Well, we haven't made a big fuss about it, mate, but because we're getting used to it now. We're getting used to it.
With the fight itself, John, just to kind of reflect on it, as I said to you, certainly at least in my eyes, I thought it was a very comfortable night's work for Sam. I spoke to you beforehand. I spoke to Sam recently. I said, Ashley, by his own admission, he went in there, never truly felt like he was going in there to win. He wanted to give his best, but he wasn't concerned if he didn't win or not. How do you adjust the fighter's mentality to kind of get prepared?
Do you know what was crazy? Sam actually said he was the hardest person to hit to the head because he'd ever boxed, because he had that kind of, I'll take my chances, but I'm not going to do anything. You know, he weren't there full hammer, which makes it easier to hit. And Sam said he was harder to hit to the head than anybody who's ever boxed. He said he was really tricky. So we just worked the body and we just done the job. And, you know, he was still throwing his shots. He was still coming off a run of 10 wins. I think in his head, he'd kind of looked and thought, this is going to be a real uphill struggle. So he was kind of putting it that way. But the fact is, it was the 6th round when the body shot crippled him. If he was really looking for an easy way out, he could have easily got out earlier than that, some of the body shots he was taking. So, you know, he was up against it. But you find that a lot with Sam. People look at it, and then when they get in there against him, they suddenly think, man, this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. You know, how relentless he is and stuff. So we just paid no attention to that, and we had the plan to do the job against whichever version turned up. And I think if Ashley had come there all guns blazing to try and get a sensational win, I think Sam would have got him earlier. I think the fact that he was being a bit cute and trying to pick his spots kept him in there a bit longer. And, you know, I said to somebody else, it was still only 3.5 years ago, he took Adrian Broner into the 9th round on his feet. So I says, treat him with respect, box him like he's, you know, he's an older guy, he's going to be a bit slower, but he's still been boxing at a good level. So he was in his mid-30s when he boxed for the world title and didn't give a bad account. I said, so don't treat him like someone who's got to 31 and it's all over. I said, he was still boxing well in his mid-30s. But, you know, he wasn't obviously wasn't the Eggington-Theophane from a few years before. But again, he was a bit craftier. And there was no pressure on him because he'd said beforehand, I'm getting older. You know, I don't expect, you know, I'm coming to have a go and see what we go. So there was no pressure on him. And that put the pressure on Sam. But he dealt with it well enough. He'd done a good job. And, you know, he practiced a lot of stuff. You know, there was little things that we've been working on that we saw. And we're like, well, hopefully we'll keep those who are going to stay in the game. So, yeah, it was good enough. He got good ratings on the TV. And he did his job that he needed to do. So, and hopefully it'll push him into a nice fight, which we're looking at now.
John, I spoke to Sam a few weeks back, and obviously the fight we know that he wants is that Cheeseman rematch. But by his own admission, he wasn't sure whether he'd get that rematch this year, but he's possibly a bit more negative about it than what he was previously. In your opinion, do you think we will see a Cheeseman-Eggington rematch? I know Ted's going to face JJ Metcalf first, but down the line, do you think it will happen? Or
maybe, but we're we make our own path. You can really end up ruining a year of a boxing career sitting there around waiting for a fight. If it comes, it'll come. If I was Ted, would I want to box Sam again? No, I wouldn't. If I was Ted's management, would I want him to box Sam again? No, I wouldn't. Because most people, mate, those kind of fights leave a mark on them. people have seen that Sam has had 10 or 12 of those kind of fights, and he'll do it again and again and again. He's got a switch in him that he enjoys it. Most people don't want those fights again, and they won't fight the same. They won't be quite as intense. And, you know, if, like I say, if I was Ted's people, if I was Ted, they've got the win. Whether the judges got the decision right or not, who knows? But they got the win. I wouldn't do it again if it was the other way around. And like I say, perhaps I might with Sam because I know he revels in those kind of fights, which he has at time and time again. But if one of the other lads, I'd just say, why would we? And I understand that. Obviously, we're going to ask for it and we're going to call for it. But now that there's been the like kind of, well, it's not happening and they took another route and, you know, you got to remember there was this option, that option, well, we're not doing this. And I doubt very much that they're getting the money that he was demanding for Sam for Metcalf. And yet Metcalf is just as dangerous as fight as Sam. So I think win or lose with Sam, he's not the kind of experience that you want to have again. Do you know what I mean? So I don't think it will, personally, unless there's a really big reason. And if there's a really big reason, it'll be there and it'll happen anyway.
John, we spoke about how packed the light heavyweight division is. Like middleweight, as domestically, it's very much stacked as well. There's some brilliant fights to be made there if it could be done. But I spoke to Anthony Fowler again a few weeks back, and I asked him, you know, would he be interested in facing Sam? He said that they've previously sparred. He's a very good fighter, and for as entertaining as a fight would be, Sam simply just doesn't hold anything which would make Anthony want to take the fight, i.e. a title. In this scenario now, what is the plan for Sam moving forward? And obviously hearing Anthony Fowler say that.
Well, we know that anyway, because it's always been the same. Because people in boxing, especially lads like Anthony, who are very good fighters who have sparred with Sam, they know how good he is. You know, you hear Liam Smith say Sam didn't do himself justice in the fight with him just because he got caught on the eye, etc. And Liam's, you know, but Liam they know how good Sam is. They know how hard it is to fight him. And unless there's something big on the line, why would they? Like Ted took that fight because Sam had a title. It was in his home kind of ground. And he was in a place of like no going back. This is what I'm saying. Why would he do that again? And Anthony's looking at that. Anthony's flying. He's a great fighter. He's got stuff coming up. Sam's a slip up for anybody. But if you beat him, everyone says, oh, well, he's had losses. He's no good. So the boxers are looking, going, we know how good he is. We know it's a risk. You know, they think they can beat him. Of course they do, you know, but they're also thinking, well, I won't get much credit for beating him. And he might turn up and give me a bit more than what people are thinking he's capable of. So Sam's kind of he's not in a really wanted club, to be honest. Like when he got beat by Liam Smith, he didn't get no offers off any prospects in Britain. He had to go to Italy. And he sparred a lot of people. And, you know, people who have sparred him know that what's there. They know that people underestimate him and kind of downplay because it's easy to do because he fights anyone. So, again, if I was the other way around, it wouldn't be a fight I'd be looking for. It's someone who's potentially tough enough to drag you into a war and leave you not feeling like boxing for a few months. Someone who's tough or good enough to beat you. Or someone who, if you do your job and get the win, nobody's going to give you massive credit anyway. So I understand that, and I'd probably be the same way, you know. And that's why we just make our own route with Sam. That's why we don't hang around, we don't wait, because we know there ain't nothing coming. He doesn't talk enough to be like a box office kind of, oh, well, we'll make that. He just fights. So we make our own route, and it's worked so far, you know. We've been there and we've waited for people, or we've even been beat by people. And Sam's made his own route and gone past and done his own thing. And, you know, his last fight, there's 1.5 million viewers. Who'd have thought that when he was getting a dodgy decision in the one before? You know, so it's no good worrying about other people too much when you're not a big star. It's no good worrying when you haven't got a huge, like, draw, like being a talker and being a what's it. You just got to fight, and you got to take the chances when they come and impress when you can. And I know Mick Hennessy's watched Sam spar, and he's really interested in doing something big with him, because he said to me, he says, I knew he could fight. He says, but until you brought like a few things to my attention, I watched him spar. He says, I didn't quite realise some of the subtle stuff that's there. And Mick thinks he can do some good stuff with him. So we'll just enjoy the journey as we have done for for 9 years. People keep telling us Sam's not going to have a long career. He's done 9 years already. You know what I mean? And you know what the funny thing is? In 2 years' time or 3 years' time, he'll retire, and people will go, see, told you he was going to retire. And you'll be like, yeah, well, most boxers do after 10 or 11 years, mate. But they'll be saying, like, see, told you he'd have to retire because he takes too many shots. He's already done more than most fighters. Most fighters don't have a 9-year career. And there's still people saying, oh, we won't last very long. But we just get on with it. We enjoy it. And hopefully keep entertaining with the crowds with the way he fights.
Moving forward, John, and on to Casey Benjamin. Just want to touch on him very briefly. Another successful night out for him against Ben Fields last time out. What's next for Casey, though?
Well, he's kind of been... He won a final eliminator for the English. And because of COVID, we sat quite patiently waiting for our shot. And he was asking me. And I says, look, you've won a final eliminator. It has to be you next. I says, we won't pressure Echo because he's got a British title fight. So it's only fair. And he was winning in the meantime, you know, just staying active. And then next thing we know, there's a vacant English title fight being made. And even though we've been told, oh, well, they've got to defend it against you, well, that means they're the defending champion then. And I was like, what's the use of doing a final eliminator? Not going to make a fuss because it won't make a difference. And it's hard times with COVID, so the board are doing what they can. But Casey was kind of like, well, I ain't going to bother with an eliminator ever again. Because he went down, he fought a final eliminator against Shaquille Day, who come in 6 pounds overweight, and Casey come in on weight because the final eliminator was that important to him. So he gave away 6 pounds. He won it. And then a year later, somebody else gets the shot. So, but again, we're not going to let that knock us. We're not going to worry about it. We'll keep moving forward. Casey's a good fighter. The English would have been nice. And like, obviously they're saying, oh, well, they've got to defend it against you. But the show Casey's on is literally 4 weeks after that fight. So they're not going to defend it then. And we're not going to wait around for another 10-rounder to get the English shot. Casey will have done like 4 or 5 10 rounds on the trot then to fight for the English. Hopefully we'll be past that and maybe doing another title. But we're looking to get Casey a good fight in this one. Another step up, you know what I mean? And again, he's a work in progress. But yeah, so that was a bit. I know COVID makes things tricky and people are trying to keep things moving, but I don't think it's going to be tricky for me to try and convince any of our lads in the gym to do a final eliminator again, because the final eliminator means you're the mandatory. No, it doesn't. And if I try and say to a lad, we'll do this final eliminator, you'll get a title shot, they're just going to turn around to me and go, no, we won't. No, we won't. That's not the rules. And when I try and say, no, look in the rule book, it is the rules, they'll say, well, it didn't happen there. So it's kind of made it tricky for me as a manager to tell people to do a final eliminator, because evidently, if the circumstances are right, they don't matter. So my guys are going to say, well, just do what they did and get me a title fight without a final eliminator. Why should I take the risk of a final eliminator when you don't have to do them? Do you know what I mean?
Final, just a couple of things I want to touch on, John. A couple of potential fights. We saw Ryan Garcia release a poster saying about with Manny Pacquiao was being discussed or had been agreed. Rather, since then, he's kind of up in the air as to what's what. Is it an exhibition bout? Is it an actual fight? Or is it actually going to go ahead at all? If a fight could be agreed there, what are your thoughts of Ryan Garcia, Manny Pacquiao about?
Do you know what? It's one of those that, you know, when you kind of give a prediction or a thought on a fight, you've already thought about that fight, even if it's not been talked about or it's not been hyped up. As boxing people, you think about all manner of fights, like what would happen if he fought him? What would go on there? We all do it from area level up to world titles. I can honestly say I've never even considered that fight until it got talked about as an exhibition. And when they said exhibition, I didn't even... So I'm not sure. You'd think Pacquiao would just be a bit too experienced at this point, you know. But who knows when someone's 22 and someone's 42? I think that's the age difference, isn't it? It's something like that, isn't it? Yeah. But I can honestly say I haven't really got a proper view on it because it's something I've never really thought about, something I've never discussed. It completely come out of the blue. I would think Pacquiao would just be a bit too experienced, a bit too physically there at the moment. But it's a no-lose for Garcia. Is it? Because whatever happens, he's fighting an 8-time world champion and he's 22. If he pulled something off, he's an absolute superstar. So Manny Pacquiao's got a lot more to lose than Ryan. But I don't know. I think Pacquiao would just be a bit too experienced at this point. Because if you put Garcia in with Thurman and people like that and Broner, you wouldn't expect him to welterweight. You wouldn't expect him to do the job Pacquiao kind of did, and Pacquiao's still doing it. So I think Pacquiao would be too experienced, but it's an interesting one.
Final one, touch on, John. We're kind of expecting it to be announced at some point soon. Canelo, Billy Joe Saunders on May 5th, or around May 5th, rather, I keep saying that, but around that date. Your thoughts if that one is finalised? Does Billy Joe possess the style which will overcome the Mexican pound-for-pound king?
He possesses the style to do the job, but whether it would overcome him, I don't know. I think it might be, is it Lara who got I think it might be like that, because Canelo's built like a brick, basically. If you says, like, kind of draw a picture of a boxer that looks like he could get it with a sledgehammer, it would be Canelo. Billy Joe's more stylish than an out puncher. So I can't see anything where he chins him. I just can't. If you don't chin Canelo, you ain't getting it. It's, you ain't getting a points decision. You're just not. He's not just like the Mexican boxing idol. He's also becoming America's and like a world one. They are not allowing a British guy with a kind of crazy lifestyle, crazy press conference kind of personality, and a not always that exciting style to get the win. So for someone like Billy Joe to get the win off Canelo, he'd have to stop him, as far as I'm concerned. And I just don't think he can. I don't think there's many that can, unless Canelo jumps up to some stupid weight. He's that relaxed. His head movement's so good. And behind all that, he's got an absolutely cracking chin. So I think the fight would be like the one with Lara. The style, the footwork and everything would give him absolute fits. Even Amir Khan was taking rounds off Canelo with speed and movement. People forget that. But then when you look at the judges' scorecards, he wasn't, was he? And I think it would be very similar. And I think Canelo would get maybe a controversial decision. And people going, well, as they did with Lara. And like I say, if he'd have gone the full distance with Khan, which he was very relaxed because I think he knew he was too big, too strong, it would have been, well, Khan won rounds, but the judges have said he hasn't. And I think it'll be very similar. I think Billy Joe has got the style and the feet to give him real problems, because Mayweather showed his weakness is quick feet and feinting. But he's such a kind of global kind of product rather than just a boxer now. Billy Joe wouldn't get it. And to beat him, he's at the stage now where it's going to be a few years where someone's going to have to stop him. And I don't think anyone's stopping him, to be honest.
John, we will leave that there now. I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of your day and get back to your boxing work. I appreciate your time today. It's good to catch up with you for the first time this year. I'm sure it won't be the last. Thank you for your time, and thank you, Speed to Boxing Social.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for all the support, and I'll see you soon.